Something unreasonably weird is afoot in San Francisco's Chinatown. What's going on, freaks and friends, and welcome to the 11th entry of the John Carpenter review series. Today we're taking a look at a film that has elements of the martial arts films of the 70s, a little bit of western thrown in there. You've got some great comedy, you've got plenty of action that is just in that 80s vein, which is when this movie is from. We're taking a look at the 1986 film Big Trouble in Little China. Big Trouble in Little China stars Kurt Russell, Kim Cattrall, Dennis Dunn, James Hong, and Victor Wong. The screenplay by Gary Goldman and David Z. Weinstein, with the reworkings being done by a gentleman called W.D. Richter, who sort of revamped it from being an 1880s sort of themed western with all these martial arts elements. He sort of modernized the script a little bit to be the movie that we are going to be talking about right here. The story for Big Trouble in Little China follows Kurt Russell as the everyman truck driver Jack Burton, who ends up getting caught up in some pretty bizarre stuff going on in San Francisco's Chinatown when he takes his friend to the airport, and his friend's fiancee is just getting off the plane and she ends up being abducted by a vicious Chinese street gang and maybe forced into sort of a human trafficking ring. And they think that might be the most of their problems there, but what unfolds is elements of the supernatural start coming in, and they realize that what they're about to get into is far bigger than any trouble they've ever encountered in their little Chinatown. One thing I admire right off the cuff is Kurt Russell's portrayal of Jack Burton. In this is sort of the era where you have these larger-than-life action heroes, and Kurt Russell sort of portrayed that previously in Escape from New York, and even to some extent in The Thing, although that was a lot more of a subdued performance. In this one, he has that character who has that larger-than-life personality, but his character really is, I don't want to say a non-factor to sort of the action and saving the day aspects of this film, but his character is definitely not he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He's kind of a dull boy in a few ways, but he ends up becoming sort of almost the reluctant hero in this, and I find that to be a pretty cool little thing that goes on. And it's one of those things that, you know, when you're watching the John Carpenter films, you always look for that little something that's going to be different, something that sort of takes away from the norm and status quo that you're expecting in a film from the sort of same ilk or cloth, as it were. But on the whole, Kurt Russell probably portrays like his absolutely most entertaining character within the John Carpenter filmography that he's done so far. And if off the top of my head, this might be probably one of the funnest and favorable Kurt Russell characters, in my opinion, overall, out of the man's entire career. If I'm hard-pressed to pick a character by Kurt Russell, Jack Burton's it right there. And what really makes Kurt Russell's performance all the more entertaining is the performance of the other actors in this film. Not only do they seem a little more competent in the whole realm of the action and the fighting scenes and whatnot, but they also seem a little more sharper. They all have a better idea what's going on. Everybody from Kim Cattrall's character, Gracie Law, to Dennis Dunn, and of course Egg Shen, played by Victor Wong. Like, all their characters seem to know a lot more about what's going on with this old Chinatown, all that mystical stuff. They all have a very good understanding on it to varying degrees. And again, when it comes to the action scenes, Dennis Dunn as Wang Chi. He knows how to sort of fight off these guys. Of course, Victor Wong's Egg Shen. He's, you know, an old sort of sorcerer, I guess would be the word, but he's not into the Chinese black magic. That's more so Lo Pan's field. I don't know, they all just seem a lot more physically competent in the whole climactic fight scene. It seems like, I don't know, I feel like Kurt Russell almost accidentally kills Lo Pan, but I mean, he does say it's all in the reflexes, so, you know. Speaking of Lo Pan, James Hong portraying Lo Pan, I think is a pretty cool villain. I think it's cool when we first see him, he's sort of in that spectral visage where, you know, he's got that very ancient, almost looks like those little Chinese dolls. He sort of has that look, and he's, throughout the film, everyone says he's anywhere from like 7 to 10 feet tall. Sort of varies depending on who you ask. When we first see him, he's very much like that when that little alley fight goes down near the beginning of the film. Like, he seems to be hit by the truck, but ends up behind the truck just fine. I mean, we see him fold over, but it's like, wow, we drove right through him. We see him like that first, and then the next time we see him, he's this very old, decrepit man who's probably in his very late 90s or into his 110s or something for all we know. Just very, very old and decrepit looking. We ultimately see that his true form really is sort of that ancient Chinese looking character, and just absolutely ghostly pale. And I really like that because of the little curse he's under, he can't touch anything. Because they mentioned in the film that he's a non-fleshly being, I believe was how they worded it, or something similar to that. When we see him try and touch Miao Yin, he can't touch her. Like, his hands go right through her, and you see also when he's walking right through the walls and everything. I think it's pretty cool how they do that. But 3 elemental masters, too, I think are really cool little trio of characters because they're so kind of cheesy looking, but at the same time, they're super freaking badass because, of course, they've got these different elements to their power. You've got the one guy who controls the lightning. Looks a little like another bunch of video game developers might owe John Carpenter a little bit of money for this one. Toasty! The other guy, of course, does thunder and he can expand his body. It's freaking insane. The other guy is wind, and he looks like something out of the old Shaw Brothers films, and I just thought that was a really cool little touch. I don't know if they were trying to make him look like he's from that sort of era of kung fu cinema, but I couldn't help but notice there's that similarity there. Like, just his whole appearance when he's not wearing the big old straw hat. When he's not wearing that, he looks like he belongs in a 70s Shaw Brothers film. But these guys are pretty freaking badass. They're definitely a bunch of people that I wouldn't personally want to mess with. I don't think anybody would want to mess with. They fuck shit up. Across the board, though, the characters are all pretty fun and enticing in their own ways. They all have something that they bring to the table. Where one character may lack a certain sort of characteristic that we look for, the other characters can make up for that. And I think that's something that really helps with the sort of characterization balance here. As far as frequent collaborators go, cast-wise in this film, we have 5 different people who will be mentioned here. We have, of course, Kurt Russell making his 4th of 5 appearances in the Carpenter films. We have Dennis Dunn making his 1st of 2, as well as Victor Wong also making his 1st of 2 appearances. We'll see both of them very soon. Al Leong and Jeff Imada are also making their first appearances here, and it is their respective 1st of 3 appearances also. Their appearances will also be in tandem, just like Dennis Dunn and Victor Wong. But the action in this, throughout this whole film, is very well handled. There was a pretty good choreography team, I think, and a lot of the stunt performers were sort of from that martial arts sort of background, which of course would make sense. If you're shooting a martial arts film, you definitely need some sort of expertise on hand, a lot of seasoned players. And if you look at the list of stunt performers, you will see some names that you might recognize, you might not, depending on how nerdy you like to be with your cinema, but you'll definitely notice some names that pop up in here. With that too, you've got a couple that are even just familiar faces all around. Specifically coming to mind right off the top is Al Leong. I think a lot of us will right off the bat recognize him from Die Hard and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He's one of the little ancient hatchetman there working for Lopan. I think it's pretty cool to see him in here. I freaking light up every time I see this man on screen. He's just a lot of fun to see. The action scenes all around are pretty well handled. The wire work is freaking insane, especially during the third act there when the good guys, they all drink the little potion, which I think definitely has some sort of ancient Chinese secret drug in there. That was just some badass shit.
I just took something and I see things no one else can.
Tell me that's not drugs in some capacity. But I think that's a lot of fun to be had there in that third act. Just the whole fight scene and the set design on top of that. The sort of, you have this ancient looking sort of temple that is also given this sort of 80s remodification. You've got the neon lights and the big old escalator, the giant freaking mouth of the demon, whatever. Definitely has this sort of almost an urban Indiana Jones sort of feel there in the final fight. And the set design throughout the whole film too, even before that, where we see Lopan's whole sort of area where he has his whole office and everything. I don't know, there's just something about that architecture and the interior sort of layout. It's just really damn eye-catching. I really like that little Asian flair going on there. A lot of the humor that we get in this film too seems like it's a lot more overt, a little more intentional in a lot of ways than it was in Starman. I know that one had some intentional humor, but here it feels like the humor is really taking a little more of a step closer to the front of the room, so to speak. It's just one of those films that I find myself laughing at a lot of stuff that goes on in here. Some of the action scenes, and it's really Kurt Russell's reaction to a lot of things in this that really makes it funny, and his character all around, I think, is, again, I've already sang the praises of his character early on in this film, so you could understand that, yes, of course he's going to be one of the most humorous elements of this already fun, humorous, engaging film. The visual effects work in this film too is one of those things where it's going in a few different directions here. I think a lot of the sort of lighting effects, like the little lightning and whatnot, and the light coming out of Lopan's eyes and mouth, that stuff looks really good, I think. The way you see his freaking body light up and whatnot, that's all really cool looking. The lightning that's coming off of the not Raiden character, I think, looks really good. The little hole in the ceiling with the lightning coming out and all that. A lot of that stuff looks really good, but what I think is where the effects feel a little weird here is the little different creature effects. You've got the little surveillance sort of monster glob thing. That thing looks a little bit goofy. Like, it's real creepy looking, but it is insanely freaking goofy looking. The sort of hairy demon thing, it definitely is one of those things where it's like, what the fuck is even that, you know? Like, it looks passable, but I don't know if convincing is something I would say that it is. I'm not trying to knock the guys who did the work on this one, but it is sort of a little laughable in some ways. The effect when the thunder guy starts to inflate, that is very much a comical effect. I don't know if humor was sort of the intention there. I think, judging by the way, you know, he starts to inflate and we get that shot on his face, I think it definitely was supposed to cause a little bit of laughter and whatnot, but I feel that whole effect is pretty giggle inducing in a lot of ways. But it's one where I think some of the superimposed, I guess, is probably how they would have done that for the little lightning and light work. I think all that would have been superimposing or something. But I think a lot of that looks better than a good portion of the physical stuff. A couple other little things too that I want to talk about on this is during the opening scene, after we get the much after the end where we see Egg Shen in the office getting ready to relay what happens in the film, and we see Jack Burton driving in his truck kind of talking over his CB, and it seems as though he's on his way to the Chinatown district. It's set up to look like the beginning of the film, like this is him coming into town, but if you listen to a lot of what he's talking about, it sounds like it might actually be after the fact of the film, because a lot of it, he's talking about things that I noticed come up in the film in various ways. Like, he's alluding to what either will happen, but I feel like maybe he's sort of talking about what had just transpired. So I think the CB banter at the beginning of the film is probably taking place after the events of the film itself. In these kind of movies that have that action hero and he's got that girl that's sort of playing hard to get in some ways throughout the film, you're expecting by the end he's definitely going to land her. That's going to be who he's walking off into the sunset with. Major spoiler coming up in 3, 2, 1, by the way. He doesn't take the girl at the end of the film. As he helps save the day, and he leaves, doesn't kiss her goodbye, heads on out the door. That I thought was a pretty cool little element there that sort of, again, it takes that status quo and turns it on its head. I would be remiss too if I didn't mention Dean Cundy's cinematography in this one. This is the last time that we see him working with John Carpenter, and he brings to this film a lot of that same greatness and spectacle that he has brought to the last handful of films that he had worked on with Carpenter up to this point. Overall, guys, Big Trouble in Little China is probably the funnest film we've talked about in this John Carpenter review series, perhaps even on the channel altogether up to this point. Fun is the best way to describe this film. It's got laughs, it's got action, it's got spectacle, it's got just about everything you could ask for in a film. I don't think there's probably any film that's really like it. There have been these martial arts comedy films over the years, but I don't think any of them really bear anything similar to Big Trouble in Little China. So this is a film that definitely stands apart from its peers. If you like the martial arts films, this is definitely one to check out. If you like Kurt Russell as an actor, this is one to check out. If you like John Carpenter as a director, check it out. There's multiple reasons why you should see Big Trouble in Little China. You're going to have fun with it, even if it's not your type of movie. There is something in here for everybody to enjoy, I think. So that's why at the end of the day, guys, I give Big Trouble in Little China 4.5 ancient underground temples lit by neon out of 5. As always, want to thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to go down here and play with some of those icons. Do what you will with those. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about Big Trouble in Little China. Have you not seen this film? Is this one that you may have grown up watching, or did you see it later in life like I did? Tell me what you thought of Big Trouble in Little China, and maybe even subscribe and hit the little bell or whatever. That way you don't miss out when we talk about Prince of Darkness. See you there next time.
Yeah.